writes differently, and there are different styles that are written, right? Like you get the Marvel style, it's like, and it's just, here's information. And the artist has to go in and decide, how can I best portray this information? Whereas in DC, or most people from DC, they're like, panel one is going to be, a medium close-up shot from up here down, looking beyond an eyeball from, and it's just like, wow, that's really detailed. And so I really think that would be very helpful, especially for amateur people, to come in and hear that from a writer's perspective.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, then let me tell you what, I'm going to jump off now and take care of this thing. And then I'll just jump back on as soon as I can, and we can break that down.
Okay.
Great. Cool. See you soon.
All right. See you soon.
See you soon, Clay. Thanks.
Hey, Kaiser, could you repeat what you were just talking about with your M2 pencil? Just because I think that was really interesting for artists.
Yeah. What I was saying was that normally when I'm doing comic pages, I use a 2H. It is a pretty hard lead. It's not the hardest, but it is a pretty hard lead. And so what happens is it's pretty light. And that's the whole idea, that it doesn't smear as much, and that when you make a mistake, you can erase it and not see it ghosting on your paper. The only problem with that is it's really hard to pick up on a camera because it is very, very light. And until you're actually pushing down, trying to make your lines more finalized, you're not going to see it. And so I've spent many hours laying out a page, doing really light work, going, okay, this is where I want. No, let me erase that. And people are looking like they're there, but all they see is my pencil moving on the paper, because you cannot discern what it is. And so I hope to do some more digital stuff for that reason, so that people can see the actual process when streaming and making comics and stuff like that. Even though I am naturally a traditional kind of artist, I would like to draw my initial stuff on the paper. It's just not for streaming. Not with the lead that I use. There are other people use HBs, and I tried that once and everyone could see it, but I'm very particular about how clean my page is. And so when I was using an HB, I kept erasing. Not the lines that I was working on, but the smears from just the lead from when I was working and moving my hand. And most people, it doesn't matter. Like they don't see it, right? Because it's like, oh, it's going to get inked and they're just going to erase over it and whatever. I don't work that way. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, it's smeared. And I'll come in with my little eraser and I'm like, so I probably added, by switching leads from a 2H to an HB, I think I added at least an extra 3 hours to my pages.
Oh my gosh. And what does the page typically take you? A day and a half, or 2 days, or a day?
It depends. It really depends on the page. But I would say on average, I can do a page a day.
And that's considered fast.
Standard. Right? No, that's standard.
That's standard. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people will tell you you have to be able to do a page a day to work in comics. And I mean, there are people who are out there who can do 2 pages a day, and that's their norm. But they also really, really rely on the inker.
Oh.
Because once you actually get an understanding with your inker, I can write tree in the back. Like, it's in the background. Doesn't really matter what kind of tree, but I can go tree. This line here is a tree. This line is a tree. This is a tree. And then, leave this open because I drew in a building. And then I go, okay, and this line's a tree, and that line's a tree, and that line's a tree. When it comes back, there will be trees inked into the panel, right? Which then saves me a ton of time because I didn't have to draw on the trees. Or they go, I trust my inker to know anatomy, to understand proportions, to be able to look at a car and go, that wheel is not on that right. So I'm going to fix it. I'm going to turn it. And so they will just draw like raw. You know, it's like this muscle, like it's not perfect, but they keep moving because they're on a deadline and they're like, I don't have time to go in here and make this muscle like nice and curvy, right? It's like, nah, it's close enough. They'll know and they'll fix it. And so that's how a lot of people get the timelines when it's just like, well, you need what done and how soon? They go, at least I have an inker to where I can scribble, push, scribble, push, scribble, push. Because if you have to come in and draw nice, super tight pencils, you know, page a day, that's why it's a standard. Because there are people who do really nice, tight pencils and then they hand it off and they get it done in a day and they have to.
So when you find an inker that's really good, you want to hold on to them because they're making your life a lot easier.
Absolutely. That's why you'll see a lot of teams. So if you're brand new, you have no team, right? You're not allowed to, and well, that's not fair. In the industry now, it's real easy to come in and like, hey, look, we've done this book on whatever on oh my goodness, I forgot what it's called now, Webtoons. And we've been doing this on Webtoons for 2-3 years. Look at this following, blah, blah, blah. We now want to transition to IDW or Image Comics or, you know, any of those comics. And you're going, but this is my team. Like, you're going to hire us. You're not going to hire me. You're going to hire us. But if you haven't done that and you're coming into the industry raw and they're like, you have talent. We want you to work on Spider-Man. And you're like, I love Spider-Man. I can't wait. This is going to be fantastic. You don't know what your inker is. They'll give you whoever is available.
Right.
And like, we need to get this inked here. You there. And the thing is, they can ruin your work. And it's not in the sense that you had this perfect anatomy and then they're like, well, I think his arm should be thinner. And so I changed it. Not in that sense, although that has also happened. I've literally witnessed one of my friends drew a mall scene, like really big establishing shot mall scene, parking lot full of cars. I mean, it looked realistic. It was amazing. When the page came back, there were 3 cars in an empty parking lot. And that was it. And then there was the building, the smallest of whatever of the mall buildings, the smallest one was inked up, and that was it. And that was sent. And it was sent to the colorist. So he didn't even get to see it until the book was in his hands. So he got it and he's flipping through and he's like, well, I didn't do that. And so now it looks like he was lazy and didn't draw because he's the artist.
No.
And so then you're back to, but I didn't do that. And they're like, well, this is what got printed. And you're like, but I didn't do that. And so your inker can really, really mess you up. And then the problem that happens is you then become less desirable as an artist because they think you're lazy. You're like, you had the opportunity to draw an entire city and you didn't. You're like, but I did. And they're like, well, no, you didn't. And nowadays you can scan it, right? It's a lot easier to prove that you did it. But that initial shock is still going to be, well, you didn't do the work. Or what happens is they have a different style than you do, right?
Have you worked as an inker? Have you saved people's butts as an inker?
Yes. I have. I mean, but that's your job as an inker. To be honest, there was people who drew hands and they were all like, and you're like, ooh, I'm gonna redraw that for you, right? I'm gonna ink this so that it doesn't look like their hand got put through a vice grip and then they tried to talk to you. But you know, that's kind of your job, right? Like you're supposed to help and try and fix the situation. But even if you were to hire me, I have an inking style. I hate inking, but I have a style, right? Like that's how I do it. And it's very angular, right? It's very graphic. It's very angular. And so if you're this very flowy and everything's bubbly and squishy and soft, and I come in and ink it, your work is going to look completely different, right? Mm-hmm. We wouldn't gel together because your style and my style doesn't necessarily work. Will it look
Yeah.
bad? No, it won't. But will it be you? No, it won't either.
Because we have Marky on the call right now, what would you tell her as a first-time comic book writer? What should she think about to make? Should she be more DC or more Marvel? Because you were just saying that Marvel's like blah, and DC is
Right.
like angle this. What's the better? What should she aspire to be as a writer, a comic book writer?
You should have something in the middle, to be honest. Enough guidance so that you get what you want out of the scene, and yet it still allows the artist to have some type of freedom to make something look really cool. Because if you tell me that I need exactly 15.2 chairs, I'm going to be mad that I got to draw 15.2 chairs, right? But if you came in and said, hey, look, there's this room and there's some chairs around, I get to figure out what looks best in the scene, right? And it's not, crap, I only drew 12. There's enough space for 12, man. I need to find 3.2 more chairs to put in this scene somewhere.
Yeah, right.
And then you're killing the creativity. And so telling someone that's like, look, this person slapped the other person, you're like, oh, okay, you need that in the scene. I get that, right? But you telling me, oh, well, this person slapped this other person, and when they got hit, their hair flew this way, spit went that way. They tripped over that chair, and you're telling me exactly what I want to do. Then there's no okay, I'm just a robot, right? Like, I'm just drawing what you want, I guess. And you can really kill the joy for the artist. But I also wouldn't let people have all of the creativity either, because I've gotten a Marvel script and I'm like, there are too many options here, right? and some people might actually relish in that, and they're like, ooh, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that and I'm gonna figure out how to make this happen and this is gonna be great. But I know that I need a little bit more direction, because if I forget something that you thought was important but you didn't tell me, I've done the page, I'm moving on. I don't want to go back and figure out how to change the layout or add a panel or anything like that. Like, I don't want to do that. And so when it's just, here's a paragraph, this needs to go into this page, and you're like, all right, well, this is important. That's because then I make decisions, right? Like, this is important, that's important, this is important, that's important. Here you go. And then you come back, you're like, well, you forgot about the trash compactor, crushing these things. And I was like, wait, was that important? It didn't seem like it was important. Well, in page 76, it becomes important. I'm like, wow. What am I supposed to do with that? So it's just one of those things where you want to make sure that what's important gets said, but you leave enough creativity or enough openness so there can be creativity, because we as artists really want that, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Now, if you're talking about more, I would say, technical stuff, I would say that you have to keep in mind not to constantly switch the scene without connecting the last panel to the panel to where you change the scene. Because that's one of the biggest things that I've ever seen from amateur artists is they have an idea and they're like, we need to be here now. And it's like, but we were just over here. And how are we going to get from this panel to that panel? Because while there is a gap, right, all those gutters in between panels is passage of time, right? And we can fill in a lot. Readers will fill in a lot. But if we were in the park here and they were talking, and the next panel they're in the grocery store, it's like, wait, did they get in the car? Did they walk there? Did they take the bus? Like, how did we get from here to here? Unless you've already like, hey, after we're done eating our ice cream, we're going to go to the store so that we can pick up pizza and dog food and stuff like that. And then in the next panel, you show them at the grocery store. Well, you've established how we got from sitting in the park to going to the grocery store, right? But if that's not in the script where you tell us that, it's just, okay, panel 1 or whatever, panel 7. Joe and Janice are sitting on a park bench eating ice cream. Dialogue. Joe, man, this ice cream is really good. Janice, I don't really like mine. I wish I had different ice cream. Panel 8, they're in the supermarket. Like, how did we get here? Like, what happened from here to here? That doesn't make sense. So I would definitely keep your scene transitions in so you know exactly what you're trying to do.
You don't want the idea that there's a missing page, so to speak.
Right.
What brought you from point A to point B.
Right. And the main reason is because you are creating this fantasy, right? No matter what, even if it was like historical comics or dragons and mini elves and stuff like that. Each one of them is creating this world that we don't live in, right? And when you do that, you're trying to captivate the reader to be in that world. And when you make that gap, when you have that gap, what happens is we realize that we're not in that world. And then we start questioning things, right? Like, well, wait, how did that happen? Is teleportation a thing? Does that work? Are we going to figure out that that's a thing? Did they run? Are they really fast? And we will lose ourselves in our reality versus in the fantasy that you're portraying to us. And that's what I normally tell a lot of my students is you don't want to leave it to where they have questions unless it's the end, right? You leave it on a cliffhanger, like, what happened? What's going to happen? You want that because you want them to pick up the next book, right? But if we're in page 12, you don't want that to happen unless it's meant to be a cliffhanger, right? Like you can have a cliffhanger in 12 where you're like, Robin is hanging from this. And you're like, oh no, what? And then meanwhile, over here, you're like, wait, no, what happened over here? What's going on with Robin? I want to know, right? And you're like, crap, why do I have to pay attention to Batman? I want to know what's going on over here. Batman's just eating soup. I don't care. Right. And so you're like, you can do that on purpose because it creates suspense.
Yeah.
What you can't do is just be like, oh yeah, that happened. We've moved on. And I didn't tell you why or how we've moved on.
Yeah.
It's great.
So
what else? Any other questions, Mark?
Now all I can think about when we're talking about, I don't care about Batman, is we don't need to know about Batman's fiber intake, okay? Let's go back to the action.
So, Brian, the objective for this is to put it on digital, right? We talked about this before. So we will create this in a way where it can eventually end up in a graphic novel if we do 10 of these in a row. But we want to know that like the action is this versus this. So,
right.
And the thought in that is there's 72 million people on Webtoons, and that's a lot. And there's a lot of material on there, so it's not like we're going to get all those people. But the idea of spending the time with something that has a bigger opportunity to really take flight is, I think, the most interesting to me,
right?
Because comic collectors are much smaller than 72 million a month, and and you could tell us maybe more. I think a good run for Marvel or DC is what, 10,000 or something
like that. Yeah.
So I mean that is a fraction of what these webtoons are doing. And the goal is not to make money off of these comics, but to raise awareness. And that's my thought in that. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, Webtoons is great because it does put that out. That platform is huge, right? And a lot of people like that. And it's great to see that there's a way to maximize on the technology,
Yeah.
right? Because now everyone has a phone.
Yep.
And it's so much easier to just, oh, you know, if it's funny, they're scrolling like, oh, that was really funny. Okay. Right. And so it's just more convenient for us to have it on a digital platform because it's easier for us to digest. Right. And even printed comics has a digital counterpart because the younger generation, that's what they use. Because it always pains me when we're like, oh, the younger people, they don't read. And like, yeah, they do. They read a lot, a whole lot. The problem is you want to see them in a book. And well, that's not the thing, right? Like that's not where society is anymore. And that's what they grew up with. They grew up with this technology. You grew up with books. That's why you think everyone should be in a book.
Yeah.
But that's not what they had. You know, you go to school and they're like, here's a laptop. They don't go here, because you and I probably remember the dusty old, you know, history books that they would, you know, cycle down from year to year to year. And it was like, this book's like 50 years old. Why do I still have this book? Right?
I own one of those books because I couldn't find it because we moved right as my senior year ended and it got packed somewhere. And so I had to pay the fine. I found it and I was like, I'm not returning this.
Yeah, right. I'm like, oh,
so I already paid for this.
Right.
So I still have my one from high school. But yeah, I had to laugh seeing some of my friends' kids. And I asked what they were doing on, you know, these little phone devices that we all are attached to now. And they're like, oh, I'm reading a textbook.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
You don't have to carry around a 40-pound backpack every day? What?
No. and I mean, I think that's great. You know, I really do. I'm personally, I don't like to read books on the phone, right? If I'm going to read a book, I'm going to read a book. But that's me. But I'm not looking at someone going, you should read this in the book because, you know, the actual printed, because it's so much better. It's like, no, it's the same words. It's going to read the same way. But for us to be able to jump onto that platform, right, and be like, hey, we have a new way to get these stories out. And I think that's the bigger thing that a lot of the old hats are not realizing, right? Because they really want to get these stories out. And they're like, we have stories to tell. They'd be fun and cool. But they're not going, here's another mode to show these stories. And you could do really, really well to just adapt to what's happening. Because even so, there are comics that you can still read digitally as a regular book, right? And you flip it like, you know, and you flip it like that and you read it like a regular comic book. So,
well,
you know,
I feel really good about that decision now. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because that's where it is. I mean, if you're okay, gotta remember when I start talking about this, I say really mean things at times, so I'm going to try to not do that. But if you're trying to capture the people who are older, they're going to be fewer and fewer.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to capture the youth, right? There's more of them. There's way more of them.
Yeah.
And so if you're like, I want to get this story out to as many people as possible so they can catch my message, so that they can be enthralled by these stories, you got to meet them where they are, right? If you're trying to reach a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, and you're like, hey, look at all these books I have. They've got great stories. And you said you like fantasy. These are all fantasy. And they're like, that's cool. Do you have it digitally? Because they will support you if it's in what they do, because grabbing a book is an extra step. That's just all there is to that. It's an extra step. If they can reach in their pocket because they were already on Discord and they're like, oh, that's right, I wanted to check out that book. It's already here, right? It's not, okay, let me go find where that book went and nope, right here. Everyone has their phone on them pretty much all the time. So why not have a delivery system that can reach them all the time.
Yeah, no kidding.
That and something that I learned working, I've worked in a bookstore since 2017. So it'll be 5 years in August that I've worked there. Is that for even for smaller comic book shops that have access to an e-platform that they can sell from, that is what a lot of places call zero stock, as in you can sell it over and over and over again and not have to stock it.
Yeah.
So for smaller bookstores and comic book shops, it is actually more beneficial to have your stuff accessible online to sell it that way. That's why there's big platforms like Libro FM and obviously Amazon's one, Audible, for audiobooks, because there are people who say, I don't have the time to sit in one place and read a book, but I could listen to one while I do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And why those have gotten so much attention over the past 5 years.
I love audiobooks.
Yeah.
They're my best friend.
Brian, I have a question for you. When you're working for Marvel or DC or whoever, well, they're the two big ones, but other ones, Image, whoever, and you mentioned that they have different ways that they give you stuff, and that Marky should find a happy medium. Is there someone, or is there a template or something, or do you have an example of someone that did it right that you could point to that would be like, this is a happy medium?
So I'm not a writer. I'm going to be honest with you.
No, but
I write my
as a
own
professional artist, receiving that and going, this is the perfect blend.
No,
okay.
like no, because when I was doing comics, you stuck to a structure, right? Did you write the Marvel style? Are you writing in the Marvel way? Are you writing in the DC way? And I'm so freeform when it comes to the script that I really want. Like, I have to really, really like you for me to want to stick with your script. Right? Like, that's because I want to tell my own story. So if I'm going to jump onto a project, it's probably because I like you, or I'm doing you a favor, or I like the cause, or something like that, and it's just like, this is where we're at. But when you get the script, I'm going to look at it, and I probably will come back to you as the writer and go, you can't do this. Like, this right here, you obviously you can, you wrote it, but I can't make this happen in the way that you wrote it. Right. So I'm constantly kind of just like, I will take it, and you're not supposed to do that. You're really not. Like, the artist is supposed to come in and then just go, all right, I'm going to draw as much as this. Like, they'll make decisions and go, I'm going to keep this and I'm going to chuck that. But I'm contacting the writer. I'm like, I know I'm not supposed to contact you about this, but what? Because I want the story to flow as well as possible without trying to step on anyone's toes by going, yeah, so I know you said you wanted me to have 15.2 chairs, but that's just, I'm just not going to do it. Because at that point, it looks like I'm being defiant.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, I know that you wrote it and you referenced it like 17 other times in different panels, but I'm not going to do that. Right. Versus going, okay, what's the significance of the 15.2 chairs?
Yeah.
Like, is that,
I'm curious as why the 0.2.
Right. You're like,
specifically
a handle somewhere.
Like all I was imagining is like the seat of one of those like old fashioned metal fold up chairs, right, like the ones we all hated because they were ridiculous and uncomfortable, just like laying across the room somewhere.
Exactly.
I love it.
But I mean, I know when I wrote for people, because I would only write comics with people that I knew.
Yeah.
And like knew, not, yeah, we work together, but I mean, like, I know what you like, I know what you don't like. Because I wrote a script for a friend of mine, and there was an action scene that dealt with martial arts. And I said, okay, in these two 2 pages. I want you to draw 1970s Bruce Lee martial arts fight. And I was like, all right, 2 pages later, this is what we're doing. Right. And then I was like, okay, this person has won at this point and they're doing this. But you can't, I very rarely, if ever, will you find someone coming out of Marvel or DC or Image going, I gave you almost no instructions for pages. I just said, you know a really cool martial arts fight? Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
And then be happy, right? They won't do that because they're like, no, I got to have a little bit more control about what's happening and how this is going to work. And so it's fun, right? Because some of them will give you the opportunity. They'll be like, there's a punch here, he kicks him here, and you get to decide what you want to do. But that freedom to be like, oh my goodness, I remember there was this part, and you can go back to a 1970s martial arts film that you remembered because you love that kind of movies, right? And you go back there and like, there's this scene that was here. I want to take this scene, I want to put it on these 2 pages.
Cool.
You won't get that unless there's a free form of conversation between the writer and the penciler, and if you know them, because you might go, oh man, everyone loves 70s kung fu movies, right? And you send that to a to a penciler who goes, I'm 21. And you're like, okay, so, and then you're like, wait, what year are we in? It's 2020. Oh my goodness. Like, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. I just made a reference to something that was 30 years younger than you. You don't even, right? And so that's why they don't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you never know who is going to be the person who's going to get it. So it becomes more structured.
Do you want to show Brian what you have so far script for him?
Yeah, I can.
To critique or to suggest things?
Just hold on.
Hello, Kat.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. You missed some beautiful gems of knowledge. We were talking about what Brian.
While you catch up, Kat, my doorbell just rang.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'll be right back.
So Brian was just talking about what he receives from different authors and writers, and what is the sweet spot between how much direction he gets and how much he prefers, where DC is super duper specific and Marvel is like they just put blobs of text and expect you to figure it out. So it's been really cool to hear what the 2 biggest companies in the world are completely different in their way that they execute comics. And we're, as you know, we're going to be doing it in a webtoons scrolling sense. We talked about that where you were already doing stuff with that. So Brian's a supporter in that, and supporting the youngins that are going to be hopefully lifelong fans.
Yep.
So Clay will jump back on, and how this is going to work, Kat, is Brian's going to be illustrating. He's going to be telling you things to do offline and online, and the same thing with Bailey. Clay's going to be helping with the story and suggesting things in the editing purpose. So in the professional world, it's asynchronous. So you hand somebody something and then they go do it and they come back. So we'll be doing a lot of that. And at the same time, Brian will be giving and Clay will be giving lessons and tips on what they're about to do and what they just did. And then so we can knock this out in a short amount of time. Brian, he usually can do a page a day. So he's going to give us the behind the scenes and teach us all as we go along. And I'm so excited. Do you have any questions or thoughts or comments?
Not really. Just like let me know what I'm doing, and I'm sure I can work with it.
Yeah, that's great. Brian, do you want to talk about we were thinking Bailey loves colors, so we were thinking she could color and you could ink, but Brian kind of inks while he's drawing. So I'm going to leave it up to him and then figure out what how you want to do it, Brian.
No, I'm going to, like I said, I pencil really, really tight, and doing it digitally, you would pencil really, really tight with a black line. And that would be your inks, right? Like that would be how you go. But what I have noticed is that I will normally come in with a blue, like a light blue, to do my sketches and stuff like that. And then I would go over and I would ink it. So what's going to happen is I'm going to try and be a little bit tighter with those sketches, because the blue sketches for me when I'm doing online work is really, I know what this line means. And, you know, like I know what's going on over here, but no one else will until I actually do the ink line. But I will tighten that up just a little bit. That way that it can still be inked. And I think that it will be very important to let someone else ink it, right? Like not have me just pretty much do everything, right? Because I think the interaction between us is going to be very informative for how things work. And not to mention, I think it's gonna add to a dynamic that would be lost if I just did it myself. So I'm going to keep things a lot looser for me, which will probably help me become even faster, which I'm super excited about. But that way we can actually have that critique, right? We can talk about things like, well, I did this. It's like, okay, well, let me show you how I would have done this, right? Like I get the panel back or the page back and like, wow, this looks really cool. Talk about your decisions that you made here. Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? And then go, I would have done this because it will punch this person forward, or it's going to push these people in the background, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So
I would love to share the versions of Adam, our protagonist, and we have like 8 versions of them. I just got a new one, and I've been looking on Webtoon and seeing that there's styles go from everywhere. You know, they're everywhere, and so I like the idea of them being kind of more realistic looking, but that's it. It doesn't matter what I like. It really doesn't. It's what I will do. It will do well. So it's really about what the target audience likes. So let me just share. Um, let me just share what I have. Oh, okay. I have to open it in Chrome. Give me a second because I was opening in Safari.
Welcome to why I was confused when I tried to stream. I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
what does this pop-up say? Oh.
Okay, I'm getting there. Just a little bit longer. And here is, so I've been paying somebody from Italy to work on characters from around the world, and I love their style. And again, it doesn't matter what I love. Can you see my screen?
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Oh. Let me go back and see if I can share again. Share screen window. Okay. So here I've got tons. Can you see my screen now?
Nope.
Nope.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
Do you see the bar at the bottom that has the share with the
Yeah,
computer
yeah, I'm
screen?
hitting it, and then I'm going share screen, and then I'm clicking on, and I'll just do entire screen. See if that works. No. It says Chrome has lost permission to capture your screen. To fix it, go to System Preferences. All right, we'll have to figure this out some other time. System Preferences. Check Google Chrome. Restart it again. Let me. That sucks. That really sucks.
First stream like this in like 2 months, and it doesn't want to work. Always happens.
Let's see. Let's see if this works.
Oh, there you go.
Hey.
Okay. So here is a comic that I created with someone from the Philippines about 2 years ago at the beginning, and then here are more characters that I've commissioned on Fiverr. Different artists, different styles, different countries. You can see we're going in alphabetical order. So this, like for example, this is the Chinese boy who uses art. Like calligraphy as a weapon. Things come to life. Like there's a couple versions of them. If you look, you'll see different versions. The guy that I'm hiring now has the gray backgrounds, so you can tell like this is Germany. It's 3 different versions of Germany. 1, 2. 3, right? She turns into a Doberman Pinscher. That's kind of her jam. But so we have Greece, we have India, we have all these cool Japan, Kenya, all the way down different versions of Mexico, Mongolia, Nigeria, 3 versions of our Nigerian character, different Palestinian, 3 different versions of the Filipino character. So here is what I have for the characters that appear in this comic. I have her name is Valiant. So she's from Puerto Rico, and she's a wise ass, kind of the best warrior that Zen knows, and they'll have a long romance. Like in season 7, they'll end up together. So she's from Puerto Rico, and she's a soldier as well. And here are different versions of Adam Zen. Here's version 1. And here is, no, that's not him. That's David Cato. That's Zen's best friend growing up, and his daughter, who dies. These don't count. These don't count. There's Cornelius. Let me go. And here's your version of Cornelius, Brian. I don't know if you remember that from Comic-Con. But here, yeah, right here. Yeah, right there. But look at all the different versions of him. Like, it's so cool. Different versions of him. So here are the versions of the alien. We have her right here. And here again, her name is Surly, named after Christelle's mom, who just passed. And here's a new version of Zen, which I think is so cool because he's a sniper. He's kind of good looking. But not, he's kind of rough. He's got scars on him and stuff. And then here's another version of him, and another version of him, and another version of him, and another version of him, another version of him, and another version. And there is yours of Zen. And then there's another version. And then we don't meet his brother yet, but he's the villain that he'll end up fighting. Kind of like a kingpin type of character. So just to give you some remembering to remember what we're kind of going for,
Right.
And we crowdsourced some ideas where we asked a whole bunch of people what he should be, and it was agreed upon that he would have salt and pepper hair, and he'd have a scar on his face. And I have those pulled up. in Safari that I can read to you, but I can't show you. But what we got was Zen's best friend Isabella Valiant. This is script stuff. We need a tagline, so this is script stuff. Adam wakes up and a woman has saved him. What does he say? So this is script stuff. What palette should we use for the alien's apartment? And we have. I'll send this to you. What palette should we use for the first apartment? What palette should we use for Santos Cityscape? And do you want to different? So that's it for the second survey, and the first survey was he has to chase a van on foot over rooftops in one of the first action scenes. After catching up to the van, how does he infiltrate the crime den? What one was he gets on top of the van, laying low but tumbling off the van before it parks to hide on the side of the warehouse.
Because how we're changing the script doesn't.
Oh, that doesn't apply?
It doesn't apply anymore.
Okay. Different outfits.
Nice try.
Different outfits. What legs? That doesn't apply anymore. At the end of the comic, Adam meets an alien woman who seems to know a lot about his certain abilities he has. She has a wig. She removes it. And obviously she's not human. What does she have under her wig? She has shoulder-length tentacles in different colors. So I guess they look kind of like dreadlocks or something. Adam wakes up in the home of the woman that saved him. What is an odd thing that she is working on when he finds her? She is holding a glowing cube suspended amidst in a few metal rings. Cool. And what color palette and what kind of line work should we use? And Bailey knows about the line work. Those are the things that we got for the surveys, and we can do more surveys as we go along. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It's like
Kind of.
so far.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that and this is where Clay will come in. You know, the biggest part is that you have to have a script. There's nothing I can do unless there's a script. And if your script is like Swiss cheese, there's nothing I can do. Right? Because I remember working for Toys R Us and they gave us the script for a graphic novel that they wanted to do over a certain amount of weeks because it was lead up to the release of their new toy line. And it had so many holes in it, like just things just made zero sense. And they're like, yeah, so the script's all done. Someone already did thumbnails for the whole book. So you really just got to go from the thumbnails to the final pages. And I made the mistake of reading the script. And I read it and I gave it to my fellow artist who was working with me. And he kind of started working. He's like, I'm just going to go and, move from this panel that they laid out. I know what it is. And I'm just going to draw it better. And I came to him and I was like, I know you've already started, but did you read this thing? And he's like, no, why would I read it? I mean, they laid it out. I'm like, because it makes no sense. And I was like, did you look through the actual thumbnails? And he's like, I looked at the first 3. I'm like, great. So the only part that made sense you looked at. And then after that, it makes no sense. And he was like, really? And then he read it and he's like, I can't draw this. This makes no sense. So I went back to them and I'm like, you got to rewrite this because there's so many continuity holes from like page 4 to page 5 that page 20 doesn't make sense anymore because this is a disaster. And they're like, we don't have a writer. I was like, wait, what? We don't have a writer. We hired someone to do this and they're gone now. And I was like, and I'm like, can I change it? Can I just rewrite this thing? So I was paid to be the colorist and the letterer. Like that's what I was paid to do. But I rewrote that entire script to make sense.
Wow.
And
it was Clay. He was a direct gig.
I gave it to my friend then because it was broken down into chapters. And I was like, okay, here's your first chapter. Draw this. And he was like, oh, wow, this makes so much more sense. Because, for instance, and it might be off topic, but this is the kind of nonsense that you can get from a writer who doesn't know what they're doing. There was this group of military specialists, right? They were called Laser, all right? And it's land, air, sea, I think extreme rescue force, right? And so I jumped onto extreme laser because I was like, holy crap, we're gonna do extractions, right? We're saving dignitaries out of here. This is gonna be G.I. Joe to the max. Like, I'm like, let's do this. And within the first couple pages, it was the team swoops in, and you're like, all right. And there is a 50-foot tornado, and it's tearing through the city. I'm like, okay, why are you sending this force in? Like, what are we doing? I'm lost. Like, I'm already lost. We're on page 3, and I'm like, why is this happening? And so I'm like, all right, let me read a little bit further. And it's like, we're saving this person, and oh, the bad people are at foot. I'm like, doing what? There's a tornado. Like, that's what we're fighting right now, is a tornado. And I'm like, this is okay. And we're, and we keep going, and they got to save this kid over here. And this person's like, watch out, rookie, don't get too close. And I'm like, okay. And then they started shooting at the tornado. Wow. And I'm like, why are we shooting at a tornado? It's wind. It's wind. It's going to go right through it. Like, that's stupid. That doesn't make sense. And then they're trying to fight this tornado that eventually dissipates. And they're all like, man, that was a tough one. I'm glad we were able to defeat that. I'm like, defeat what? It went away. Like, there's the air system and the humidity. It just went away. What are you talking about? Right? And so I was like, okay, that made no sense. So I went back to them. I'm like, who are they fighting? Like, who's the bad guy? Like, who's the Cobra of this knockoff G.I. Joe? Like, who's Cobra? And they're like, we here at Toys R Us don't believe in bad guys. But they've got guns and rocket launchers. You're like, yeah, well, they're going to fight the elements. Who's controlling the elements? Because tornado is not just going to pop up and be like, I hate humans, and we're going to stop it. Like, that doesn't work. You're not giving us any explanation. And they're like, well, we didn't, like I said, we don't believe in bad guys because we don't want to teach children that you can become a bad guy. I'm like, you can't have good guys unless there's a bad guy. Yeah. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And so when I rewrote the script, because I made a bad guy, the whole final chapter was revealing the bad guy, because I was like, you need a bad guy. We created one, character designs, everything that they didn't ask for. We're like, we're making a bad guy because this makes no sense. And I told them, I was like, we can keep the tornado and they can fight the elements and stuff, but I'm going G.I. Joe Weather Dominator. So there's a reason why this is happening. And what's inside this tornado is a giant robot that's spinning so fast that it's actually creating the effects of a tornado.
Cool.
So that they actually have something to fight. And so when the rookie got too close, he was trying to shoot rockets into the tornado to hit the robot, so the robot would be damaged, so the tornado would stop. Because that's linear thinking, right? Like, that's the way this should work. And, I'm like, hey, here's what I would suggest we do for this. And they're like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I'm like, thanks. And this is why it's important to have a writer. And that long rant was because you weren't here, Clay. So I answered a question.
You were vamping for me. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, but it's like the importance of a writer and making sure that the writer is not losing anyone, like we talked before, from panel to panel, to page, is so important because we are creating a fantasy world, right? Even if you said this is New York, there is no Spider-Man in New York. I don't care that you call it New York. There is no Spider-Man, right?
It's its own thing.
Right. It's its own thing. And if you break me from that thing, I'm no longer enjoying the story that you want me to be immersed in. Right. And so that's why I know that we're trying to give the writers more props and the props that they duly deserve. But ultimately, you see comics, you're like, ooh, the artist. Right.
Yeah.
But without the writer, that artist isn't going to give you those comics. If you have a crappy writer and a great artist, it's going to look pretty, but you won't stick with that series because the story's stupid.
Right.
Marty,
you got to have both.
Yeah.
Marky, do you want to show us what you pulled up from the archives?
Yeah. I can put that on screen now.
It's like you came in just in time, Clay.
Perfect timing. It's my superpower.
Amazing.
Nice.
All right. Okay, cool. It is showing. So this is, I believe Clay has seen this at least once.
If you're showing it, we can't see it.
What?
I can't. I can't see your screen.
Yeah, I can't see anything.
Why does it? It says it's sharing. Oh my God, I'm going through the same thing that Nate did.
I'll vamp for a second while Marky is figuring that out.
Bam! There we go.
I see it.
Ha ha!
But
I don't have to
I think
vamp
that I
anymore.
might should
I still don't see it.
Yeah, me neither.
add the stream. Boom.
Oh, there it is.
There we
There
go.
we go.
Ta-da! Okay, so this is what we have so far. So it's kind of page one is we're setting the scene. So we're in this urban setting in Santos, Brazil. Just kind of having that scene setting shot. And then we go to the interior of apartment where Zen is checking out a young kid's leg who's been pretty badly injured, with the parents kind of hanging out there and kind of helicopter parenting, if you get the drift there. So having him kind of turning to a bag that he had and asking the parents to step back so he has some space to work. We're doing like a little we wanted to do a reference to a nod to some of the other teams from the comic book jam by having on the inside of the backpack, having like a fictional seal insignia with some names that are surrounding it as he's kind of digging through this bag. And then you have a view of the apartment, door open, with Zen sitting with the kid who's bandaged up, as there's a crash and a scream that are coming from outside. Then you kind of get this stairwell shot of this apartment building, of two guys that are hauling a girl downstairs who's crying for help. Zen then pops out of the apartment, seeing as she kind of disappears, and then just kind of little like short shots of things as he's like giving instructions, getting his stuff together, and then making his way to a fire escape, where he exits the building, sees the van with the men getting in it with the girl kind of in the back. And he's calling Valiant. He's chasing the van from the rooftops, and he's explaining to Valiant what's going on, as basically she's telling him, this isn't your fight. This isn't your job anymore. You need to stop. And he's just like, I can't do that. So when he gets on the top of the van and it pauses at a corner, the passenger door is opened and there's a guy from inside that tries to pull him off the top of the van. And basically, after listening to your description, Kaiser, I'm actually going to change, instead of having it panel by panel for this fight, I have an idea of some ones that I want to reference for kind of this fight that is in the streets. And then I'm up to correcting things on page 6 that I still have to fix because it's still set and references the warehouse scene that was in there.
Cool. Can I jump in and just make a couple of comments on this, or
Absolutely.
I don't want to I don't want to stop the flow here. Yeah, so just a couple of quick thoughts looking this over. If you go back to page 1, I love how you're dialing in right from the general to the specific. You're starting with the establishing shot, then we're getting into the apartment, then we're getting closer on Zen, who we're focusing on, then you're dialing, even closer to the insignia, and then kind of pulling back. So I might just suggest that you drop us into the middle of a conversation here, just because I'm thinking about this page visually. And again, I don't want to be prescriptive because I don't, I don't want to say I'm right, or this is the right way of doing it, or this is the wrong way of doing it, or whatever. But I'm just thinking this is a very silent page. So like, you're telling us in the stage directions that this is Santos, Brazil, and the image reference that we have, I'm kind of looking at it and I'm going, well, that could be Miami, that could be, that could be a whole lot of different cities on the water.
Ironically, it is actually a picture of Santos, Brazil. I actually Googled it to find a good one for what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great. But I think we have to give the reader some idea of where we are, whether you want to do a caption, right? That just says, Santos, Brazil, whatever, the date, the time. I mean, whatever, if you want to go with this military kind of thing, it could be very specific, like, date, time, whatever. Or you don't have to do a caption at all. We can get it across some other way in the dialogue, but I'm feeling like you may want to just put us in the middle of a conversation, like panel 2, that there's some kind of conversation happening, whether the parents are nervously asking, is he going to be okay, or whatever, just something that shows us that we're like flies on the wall in this conversation that's already happening.
Okay.
And so I feel like you can flesh it out a little bit more with captions and dialogue. And so that then on page 2,
okay,
if you want to scroll down there.
Right.
So yeah. So you just want to make sure that you're like, we were talking earlier, I think before the stream started, like ways that a comic book script is different from a screenplay. It's different from, a stage play or whatever. It's not meant to be read by anybody but the artist, and really all you have to do is communicate what it is you're saying to the artist. And now, like, I was recently working on a project with somebody where I thought I was being clear when I talked about the character coming out and looking up at the impossibly bright stars in the sky. I thought that was clear that that was night, and he drew it as day. And then the colorist, of course, colored it as day. But it was important story-wise that this happened at night. And I point that out only to say that if you think you're being clear, be clearer, right? So I'm looking at this page turn as an artist who isn't in your head and doesn't know exactly what you're thinking. So it goes from this apartment with the door open to then two men hauling a girl downstairs who is thrashing wildly. So I might want to clarify, we're out in the hallway now, or out in the stairwell now, and we see two men, and you may want to describe them. What do they look like? Are these important characters that we want to remember visually? Now, the artist is also going to have some ideas of how they might visualize this person, right? And this is a conversation. It's sort of like casting in a movie, right? If I'm writing a screenplay, I might say, I might describe a character a certain way, but that doesn't mean casting has to cast somebody who matches that exactly, right? Like if I say that this person is super tall, I might just be throwing that out there so we can visualize a distinct character. Maybe they cast somebody who's super short, or somebody who has a mohawk, or something that makes them visually distinctive. Anyway, you might just want to describe these characters to your artist. What kind of men are they? What age are they? What are they wearing? You don't have to write a novel, but something to just kind of tag them to make them visually distinct, and also to just tell us exactly where they are. Because it could be they're in a duplex, and so the artist is thinking, oh, well, maybe this is a duplex apartment, and there's stairs going down from one floor to another, so we're still inside the apartment. So I think you just want to clarify that this is outside the apartment. And then with the screaming, you also want to set that out into dialogue, because first of all, it's going to be important for the artist to know, do I need to leave room for any kind of lettering or sound effects or things like that? But also, once this gets to the lettering stage, the letterer is going to want to be able to clearly see what they have to do. Screams, sound effects. There was a sound effect somewhere. Let's see. She's thrashing wildly. She continues screaming. She's staying upstairs with a struggle, gripping and losing grasp of a railing. Zen pops out of the apartment, seeing her disappear from the stairwell. Boots running in motion, picking up the backpack. I thought I saw somewhere there was a sound effect, but in any event, if there's a sound effect or something,
the phone ringing. Right
the
here.
phone ringing. Yeah. So separate that out on its own line, and you can just do SFX for sound effects.
Okay.
And actually spell out what you want the sound effect to say. Because if you don't do that, I guarantee you the letterer is going to get creative and do sound effects that you don't like. And they'll do it on purpose to be like, well, they didn't tell me what they wanted. So, like, I literally know of a professional letterer who works for DC and Marvel, who anytime somebody says there's a sound effect, but they don't specify what it is, he makes it bathroom, which reads as bathroom. He makes it look great, but the sound effect is bathroom. So that's his little way of like sticking up the middle finger to the writer who didn't specify the sound effect. So
I love it.
So anytime there's something like that, screaming, sound effect, if anything that the letterer is going to have to letter, just go ahead and set that off in its own line that's very clear, kind of like it's dialogue.
Okay.
And then for the dialogue, you want to specify, rather than dialogue, right? You want to specify the character who's speaking, kind of as you did.
Yeah, and that was something I forgot to change.
Right. So all of this is just about being super clear to the artist what it is they're drawing, and super clear to the letterer what it is they're lettering. And depending on the artist that you're working with, some artists like to say, this is what the writer wrote. I'm going to draw it exactly as the writer wrote it. And I'm just going to turn off my brain and I'm just going to draw exactly what they wrote and cash the check. There are going to be other artists who, oh, my cat is trying to get involved in this conversation. He just jumped up. You might have heard him thump the microphone. Anyway, but some artists will look at the script and say, and I'm not saying this is right or this is wrong. I actually sometimes like this approach, when an artist will look at a script and be like, okay, they've given me an idea of what's happening on this page. Now let me figure out how I can really make this sing. And they may not follow your layouts at all, the way you've laid it out, because you have some 7 and 8 panel pages here, which are very dense pages. Which is neither a good nor a bad thing. Most comics these days tend to look for about 5 panels per page, going up to 7 as like a max. But you can look at older comics that are great that do 8 panels, do 10 panels. It really just kind of depends on what the artist can handle. But if you've got a big, like the trend these days is to stick to about 5 panels, with at least 1 panel being some kind of like big visual moment.
Okay.
So, but some of these, like, it looks like they could be, because I know we talked before about doing something like, the Fraction Asia Hawkeye, right? Where there might be like little panels, right? And I think some of these, the boots in running motion, picking up the backpack, perched in a window, smirk, like those things on page 2, they might be really small panels. They may not take up a lot of real estate. We've got to get those bits of dialogue in, but it's not a lot of dialogue, So like, I don't necessarily think that these, that page is too crowded, but what I'm saying is, just start thinking about that, because an artist may look at it and go, well, she wrote 7 panels, I can do it in 5. Or they might look at it and say, well, there are 5 panels here, but really there are like 2 different things going on in this panel, so I need to break it into 2. Just an artist, every artist has their own way of approaching a script and their own way of visualizing it. And you can, you can tell any story in any amount of space that you need. I mean, we've decided on 10 pages, right? But you could theoretically tell the whole story of the Legion of Eccentrics in 10 pages. Right? It's going to be a super dense 10 pages, but theoretically you could do it. If you go back and you look at older comics, like every scene is only a panel, and each panel is jam-packed with dialogue and captions and everything you need to know to tell you exactly what's happening. That's one way of telling a story. The fashion now is to take a little bit more time with it and not try to jam-pack it so much. So, all of that is to say is that, like, I'm not somebody that believes there's a right way or a wrong way to write the comic. Just as long as it's an enjoyable reading experience for the reader, and as long as, the artist is on board and this is how they want to visualize the thing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that does. One thing as I've been working on this, like even during the comic jam itself, when we were working on our individual comic over that like 3 days, is
how I picture it in my head is I want to give like the cheesy stick figure drawing of this is what's happening.
Right.
And then leave it up to the artist to interpret that and add their flair to it, because I feel like writers and artists should be creating something together, and I don't want them to feel like they're, as Kaiser said earlier, as they're a robot and just doing what I've written.
Right. Right.
Because I like giving that creative freedom. Some of my favorite things that came out of the Comic Book Jam comic that we made are because Bailey and Kat were like, okay, I love this idea, but what if we added this spin on it?
Yeah.
And I was like, absolutely, that's perfect. I mean, that's how our adorable little robot friend came out, is because of something that Kat and Bailey and I were talking about, and they were like, we feel like Mitzi needs like a buddy, like a little like robot buddy, because she's so like technologically like focused. And I was like, that would absolutely fit their thing. So
Right.
absolutely go with it.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens when you're really collaborating, right? That's the true nature of collaboration. And that's really what you don't want to be so prescriptive in your writing that the artist feels like they have no room to improvise and put their own spin on things. You know, and that, but you know, they also have to be telling the same story, right? Like you can't be rowing in different directions either, you know. So you really just got to find where those two things come together.
Okay. So I think I know what my assignment is between now and when we meet on Thursday, is going through and revising this fully and getting it to where Brian or Kaiser can really just hit the ground running at that point.
Right. Yes.
That sounds like a plan.
I love it when a plan comes together.
Right.
That's my A team.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I would just say go through this. Make sure you call out all the dialogue, all the sound effects. Make sure you attribute the dialogue to whoever's speaking.
Yeah.
Also think about, I don't, you're very sparse with the dialogue, so I don't see this necessarily being a problem for you, but you want to think about it. If you've got a lot of panels on the page, or think about the space in the panel. Do you have enough room for all of this dialogue? A bigger panel can support more dialogue. A smaller panel can support less dialogue. But you also, if that big panel calls for a lot of, if there are a lot of visual elements, you just want to make sure that you've got room for all, you don't want to have the lettering then cover up all those visual elements that you've called for and that the artist has gone through all the trouble of drawing.
So I think this is great. We have a plan of action.
I'm gonna
Mark,
stop sharing so we can end this with all of our wonderful faces on the stream instead.
Marky, do you have any other questions, or Kat? Does that sound okay as far as inking in the blue and the black ink and learning that way and contributing as any other? So by Thursday, Bailey, Marky, you will have the script pretty much nailed down in a way where you can show Clay and Brian and then get some feedback. Does that make the most sense? Does that make the most sense?
Yeah, so it's Marky's gonna write it, and then Kaiser's doing the like thumbnail / layout, whatever, and then I'm inking that, and then Bailey's coloring it. Is that right?
Brian's going to be the main illustrator. You're going to be the inker. Bailey's going to color. Brian's going to give feedback and notes along the way and help with everything. I don't know who's going to do the lettering. Maybe you or Bailey.
I know Bailey had a lot of fun doing the
Okay.
lettering. So,
Well, maybe y'all can share that, or Bailey can do it. And so the way before you got on, we were talking about, because we're going to knock this out in a short amount of time. Brian will kind of tell you what he's going to do and then show you what he's done, and give you assignments. So we can do it asynchronistically, just how it's done with professional comics.
Oh, okay.
And Clay will be there as an editing eye to be like, yeah, maybe this could be cleverer or whatever. He's got a nice, cool sense of humor. So that's the plan. I think that it sounds good. Will you be able to is there anything we can do in the meantime, Brian or Clay, while we're waiting for Marky, or is that the next step?
There's one thing that I would like to know. Which version of the main character are we using?
Yeah.
That's going to be important, because I would probably need to draw it a couple of times, because drawing it raw on stream is why you got that really thin guy for me the first time. All right. And I was like, I guess this is what we're going for. But if there was one that was like, oh, this is the one that was picked, or this is the one we're going to go with, whatever the case may be, if I could get that information, would be great.
I think the most recent Fiverr thing that you got, Nate, of Zen is probably the closest to what everyone voted on for the basic look. We just have to make him a little more salt and pepper than he is.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send that to you.
That's just my opinion.
Kaiser, and then you can do your magic. You can make your magic happen with what you see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, cool. Any other? I learned a hell of a lot in the last hour and a half, hour 49 minutes. Thank you. Kaya, will you be able to make? I know you're working and schooling and all the things. Will you be able to make next Thursday, or this Thursday upcoming?
Yeah, I'm a little confused at the times because my email invitations always aren't the right times. So, is it
That's
like
interesting.
3 next Thursday again, or what?
You know what? Maybe your Google Calendar set to the wrong zip code. That's happened to me in the past.
Maybe, but then even when I like do the time zone, like Google the different time zones, it tells me the wrong time. So I'm not sure.
Well, I can tell you that it's the right time on the calendar. Everyone, it is now the right time. It was wrong. Brian corrected me a couple days ago. I was like, wait a second, you said 5, but this says 4. So whatever it is now is correct.
Okay, so that's just for Tuesday and Thursdays.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then you'll be working at your own time in the meantime. So Brian will assign you things, and Clay will too. We'll see what happens. Clay is going to jump in and out because obviously Brian's going to be spending a lot more time drawing and all of that. So he will come in and grace us with his big brain on specific occasions when Brian goes, yeah, pull in Clay, pull in the big gun.
I'll be ready. I'm ready. Tag me in, baby.
Pull in the big guns. Let's freaking
Put me in, coach.
That's right. I'm ready to play.
This is so exciting for me. I've been theorizing about this for over 2 years. So to see people that I respect and I admire and that have great talent it's a big one. So thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for having
having
us. Yeah.
Upward and onwards. Let's get this, y'all.
Sounds good.
Go team, go!
Yeah.
Thanks so much,
Bye, guys.
everybody.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.